Good afternoon, and welcome to the government's daily COVID-19 briefing. And I'm joined this afternoon by my colleague Albert Isola, who will address you in a moment primarily on business-related matters. On 24th of March of this year, most schools in Gibraltar closed as part of a series of measures designed to protect our community from the coronavirus. A lockdown was put in place to control and ultimately to prevent the spread of the disease in a way which would cause large numbers of infected persons and overwhelm the GHA. At the same time, arrangements were made to increase the number of beds, the number of ventilators, and to have sufficient stocks of PPE. As we were doing all of that, we were constantly advising everyone of the need to stay at home, on the importance of social distancing and hand hygiene. The lockdown has affected everyone, individuals, young and old, and businesses. The effect of the lockdown has been that we have so far not seen a surge in the number of COVID-19 cases, nor on the demands of the GHA. Numbers have remained relatively low, and we have not had a single COVID death. We need to keep it that way. We can only do so by continuing to follow the rules, by continuing to listen to the advice of the government and of Public Health Gibraltar. And at the same time, we have to recognize that this lockdown, cannot last forever. We are already seeing a relaxation of some of the measures put in place by other countries. A key feature of what every single country is doing is a cautious, prudent approach with gradual steps taken and pauses between each step to assess the effect before moving on to the next phase. That is precisely what we will be doing in Gibraltar. Over the last week, you will have heard the Chief Minister and other colleagues in government tell you about our plans to ease restrictions. A route map out of lockdown is being finalized and will be published shortly. That route map includes our plans for a gradual and limited reopening of our schools. Those plans have been developed and agreed with the Teachers Union, NASUWT. And I want to share with you today details of the education roadmap for the reopening of schools. Specifically, this will deal with the steps which we are proposing to take between now and the end of the school term on the 7th of July. But before I do that, I want to share with you and provide you with the COVID-19 figures for today. The total swabs which have been taken are 3,366. Results pending, 259. Results received, 3,107. Negative results, 2,850. Confirmed COVID cases, 144. Active, 3. And recovered, 141. These results include the tests from the ongoing frontline targeted and systematic program. The total random swabs taken as part of that program is now at 721, with 172 results pending. There have been only 2 confirmed cases from the 549 results received, with 1 recovered and 1 active. In the last 24 hours, there were 44 attendances to A&E. 7 had COVID symptoms. 4 were swabbed. There was 1 admission to the John COVID ward, and no admission to the COVID CCU. These figures are naturally encouraging, but they also demonstrate that the virus is still out there and we cannot let our guard down, as we constantly tell you. Our efforts to contain the spread of the disease must continue, even as we ease our way out of lockdown. On the 18th of March, this year, the Prime Minister and Secretary of State for Education in the UK announced that schools would close. By then, school attendance in Gibraltar was down to about 35%. And that week, the UK examination boards confirmed that GCSE and A-level examinations for the summer of 2020 would be cancelled. Given the low attendance at the time, the fact that UK schools would close, and the cancellation of exams, we agreed with the Teachers Union, NASUWT, that it would not be possible to continue to deliver the national curriculum in Gibraltar. All schools, except Notre Dame in the lower primary sector, St Anne's in the upper primary sector, Westside in the secondary sector, and St Martin's closed as from the 24th of March. Since then, Notre Dame, St Anne's and Westside have been operating as childcare supervision facilities, and St Martin's has also been open. The childcare supervision facilities have been open at weekends and have operated extended hours. They have also been open during all public holidays and the periods when schools would normally have been closed for holidays such as Easter. We also put in place a home learning service for the many children that were at home. As we start to ease our way out of lockdown, we must plan for the reopening of schools. Last week I explained the principles which would guide us as we developed this plan. These principles are designed to prioritize the safety and security of all the children, teachers and other staff in schools, as well as the safety and security of the whole community. And I would like to repeat those 4 principles. They are as follows. 1. A gradual, slow return to schools to be achieved with a prudent pause between each step. 2. Public health advice on social distancing and hand hygiene to be respected throughout the period to the end of the summer term. 3. Children who are at a critical stage of their learning journey are brought back first, with some children being brought back to each school. 4. The Department of Education and schools will maintain to the extent and for as long as possible the following services: home learning for those not able to attend school, child supervision facilities for those parents who need to work and who are unable to arrange alternative childcare without involving relatives over the age of 70, and extended hours for children of key workers who need to work shifts. Acting in accordance with those principles, we have now developed a staged plan for the reopening of schools. St Martin's will continue to operate until the end of term, as it has been operating all the time during lockdown. For the next 3 weeks, there will be no change in the current arrangements involving Notre Dame, St Anne's and Westside, except that weekend supervision will cease on Sunday, 17th of May. This is consistent with public health advice of waiting a prudent period between steps out of lockdown. We have started to ease restrictions on businesses, and we should wait 3 weeks to assess any effect this may have before taking the first step in education. Extended hours supervision and the creche facility will end on Friday the 22nd of May. All schools will reopen in a limited way on Tuesday the 26th of May, the day after the late spring bank holiday. In the lower primary sector, Year 2 will be brought back. They will be split in 2, with half attending for 2 hours in the morning and the other half for 2 hours in the afternoon. Similarly in the upper primary sector with Year 6. Years 2 and 6 will be moving to a new school in September. Transition work is completed with these pupils during this term in order to prepare them for a transition to the new school. It is critical to do some of that work during this school term. That is why Years 2 and 6 have been chosen as the first year groups to be brought back. We will also have Year 6 attending the Hebrew primary school, split up into smaller groups. A plan is to bring one year group back to Westside and Bayside. This is subject to announcements in the UK, which may happen this Sunday, on the easing of restrictions and possibly the reopening of schools. We expect to take a decision, to be in a position to take a decision as to which year group or groups will be the first to start in our secondary school by next week. After the first step is taken on the 26th of May, we will wait another 3 weeks before we take the next education step. The second step will coincide with the start of summer hours, or half days as some of us used to call it, on Tuesday the 16th of June. The second step will involve all children who have been attending in the morning or the afternoon, all attending from then in the morning. We will also consider nearer the time whether any other year groups will be brought back as part of the second step. That arrangement will then continue for another 3 weeks until the end of term on Tuesday the 7th of July. Parents will be informed via the usual school channels of communication what plans will be in place for their children. I should stress that these plans, as with everything else we do related to the easing of restrictions, will be fluid. We will need to assess that the public health criteria for unlocking continues to be met at each stage of the process. We will also be monitoring the effect of any particular step, whether in education or more generally, before deciding to take the next step. We will consider the numbers attending to make sure that we can take the next step prudently and safely. Arrangements may therefore be modified to deal with any particular issue that may arise. It is, in any event, obvious from what I have said, in particular with the slow, gradual approach which we will be taking, that there is insufficient time, and it is simply not possible or even desirable to bring all children back to school this term. In fact, the majority of children will remain at home. Those children will continue to be supported with home learning. In addition to the year groups that will be coming back, the schools will also be available to children of other years who meet the criteria for childcare supervision facilities. In particular, this is available for children whose parents need to work and who cannot make alternative childcare supervision facility arrangements without involving relatives over the age of 70. It is imperative that any parents who wish to use the service should fill the form, which is available at www.education.gov.gi. The form must be filled in by the Thursday of the week before, at the latest. An important change, as from 26th of May, from what has happened until now in relation to childcare supervision facilities, is that children will go back to their own schools if they require those supervision facilities. Also, as from the state, the facilities are available only for children enrolled in government schools. As we start the gradual and limited reopening of schools, we will be adopting strategies to mitigate risks. Above all, our main priority will be to safeguard the well-being of our children and staff in our buildings and under our care. Risk assessments will be carried out to ensure adequate social distancing measures are adopted. Staggered entry and exit and dismissal will operate to avoid large gatherings. There will be regular and more frequent cleaning. Consideration is also being given on how to handle break times and the ratio of the approximate numbers of children and adults in each class. We are aware that returning to school after the COVID-19 lockdown is going to be hard, and it will be a very different experience for every school and for children, staff and parents. We will all have been changed in some way by the experience of the lockdown. It will take time to adjust to what we're now calling the new normal. We will need to recognize and allow for this by acknowledging that we need to be patient and understanding to each other and ourselves. The re-establishment of routines may be difficult. This will not just be for school routines, it will also be for those basic daily routines, such as sleep and getting up. Different people will have had different experiences during the lockdown. It will take time to re-establish and relearn the expectations of school behavior and learning. So a key focus in school will be on rebuilding relationships and establishing routines. Schools will work sensitively with the aim of establishing a firm basis for children from which they can move on. We are acutely aware that the impact of the lockdown will have been even greater for those with special needs. School closures will have had an impact on their learning, as will issues of being or not being in school, managing change, routines, and anxieties. The transition of these children will need to be managed and enhanced sensitively. Many children will be looking forward to return to school, but some may find being around people difficult, frightening, at times even overwhelming. We will need to be aware of this and support these children. Above all, we will make every effort to make this transition back to school as smooth and stress-free as possible for all those involved, children, parents, and staff. We ask parents to work closely with school staff to ensure that we can safeguard the children's physical and emotional well-being during this period of adjustment. And with that, I hand over to my colleague, Albert Isola.
Thank you very much, Gilbert. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Gilbert has mentioned, today we have 3 active cases. And people understandably are asking, if we have 3 cases, why can't we open up more? Why can't we accelerate the easing of the lockdown? And I would say to all those that think that they need to remember the reason why we are where we are with 3 active cases today is because of the measures we've taken, because of the steps that we've taken, and because of the things that we've done, principally social distancing and the lockdown. And so I would ask you to think carefully before believing or surmising that we are through this. I think my personal view would be that we are winning the war, but the war is by no means won. We still have a long way to go. There are many things that we still have to deal with, and the easing, I believe, will be tougher than the lockdown. It's going to be a difficult road ahead for all of us in how we deal with with working our way back to the new normal as it's becoming to get known. But we are only as good as we are because of the steps that we have taken. And I ask people to please remember that. And at the same time as I say that, I say a huge thank you to all of you for having done what we've asked. You know, we've taken some extraordinary steps in legislation to force people to do certain things because we were advised and we believed they were necessary. And we've been able to do that because we've done it together. Frontline services, essential services, government, private sector, public sector, and of course you people all over our community. So it's Team Gibraltar that has got us to where we are, and Team Gibraltar needs to keep working to ensure that we don't lose focus and we keep fighting this in the way that we believe we need to. We will ease. The Chief Minister has already described the Unlock the Rock document that we'll be publishing in the coming days, which will give much more detail on how we propose to ease the lockdown and take the steps that we will be taking in the coming days, weeks, and potentially even longer than that. Because as Gilbert has already mentioned, this is fluid. This is moving and this is changing. And therefore, we will take a measure, hold, watch, take the next measure, hold, watch, and if necessary, and if we don't comply, and if we do silly things, take a step backwards, which is what none of us obviously want. And to give you an idea, for those of you that think COVID is beaten and this is over, I would ask you to reflect that in the United States of America, in the last 7 weeks, 33.5 million people have lost their jobs. 33.5 million people in the United States have lost their job in just 7 weeks. The previous high was in 2009, when some 840,000 people lost their jobs. In the same period, the comparable is 20 million against 800,000. When you look at the UK today, has hit over 30,000 deaths. You begin to understand that we're doing well, but we still have quite some way to go. I was here before you last week and I told you that the number then of active cases was just over 3 million. Today it's 3.7 million and 260,000 deaths, 60 more in the week since I was last with you. So it's not over. We are winning, but let's keep going, let's remain focused, and let's keep following the advice that we are receiving from our experts. Because I believe that if we do, we will see this through. In looking at how business is responding, we have spent a lot of time this past 10 days and 2 weeks in looking at the next series of measures that we are putting together to support our business community. The economy is an important part, as is, of course, the health of our citizens. And so today we have published what we call a new set of regulations to the Beat COVID regulations, which we call the furlough. Furlough for the excluded sector. These are firms that haven't been able to apply for the Beat COVID measures because they're not in the included sector, only for the excluded sector. They will now be able to, with the consent of the Financial Secretary and the Director of Employment, make inactive up to 25% of their staff. By declaring someone inactive, like in the Beat regulations, they will not be able to work, and they will receive the sum of 1155, as in the Beat regulations, or 50% of their salary, whichever is the higher. This payment will not attract pay-as-you-earn or social insurance. This, of course, enables these firms to reduce their cash burden by paying less for inactive employees during this period of time. And although every excluded sector is eligible for this, every sector will require approval from the Financial Secretary before an application can be made to the Director of Employment for declaring any employee is inactive. Again, my thanks to CELAC, the group which represents the trade organisations, the unions, for their support in going through all of these measures. also to the opposition. We've had a series of meetings. The last one was on Saturday, where we went through the documentation and the technical wording, and I'm pleased to say that we published these regulations today with the support of all these parties that I've mentioned. Also today, we'll be publishing changes to the BEAT regulations, the ones for the included sectors. And the change there is to enable firms to claim for 50% or 100% of their BEAT payment. Why? Put simply, we have begun to open the retail sector. We have begun to open different shops and businesses. And so there may be a case for some of those firms putting their people into part-time work, working half of the time. And so whereas before you could only apply for BEAT if it was 100%, the full month inactive, now you can be active for half, inactive for the other half, and you can claim 50%. This is an important measure to continue to support the business in Gibraltar that are beginning to come back from lockdown and being eased open, to ensure that they have some support during this difficult time as we begin to work towards coming to what we call the new normal. I think that is important, and I'm pleased, again, with the support of all the different parties that I mentioned previously, we've been able to come to this conclusion. To go back to April and BEAT, just to give you some statistics on where we actually are, we have paid out on April BEAT 6.26 million, 6.2 million pounds has been paid out for the month of April BEAT. We've had 6,073 employees or people being paid, of whom 435 have been self-employed. We have had 879 employers submitting their applications, all from the included sectors, and we have rejected 540 employees. We have also now agreed final wording for the new changes to the Insolvency Act. These changes will protect businesses from being put into liquidation during the period of pandemic only, and also provide protections to directors who have a liability if the company is technically or insolvent. Those will be published in the coming days. It will be a bill that will be considered by Parliament at its next sitting, which I expect to be in May. We have discussed this with SELAC, we've discussed this with the opposition, and I'm pleased to say that although there is some disagreement on one of the technical aspects of the bill, that it has their support, and we will be discussing that at the next sitting of Parliament. Finally, to report on Task Force Future. The first thing I want to say is that the sectors that we are working with, financial services and gaming principally, they are showing an enormous amount of resilience. You may recall that one of the measures that we introduced at the beginning of this process to support businesses with their cash flow was to defer the fees for the Financial Services Commission. All the firms have to pay significant fees to the Commission on the 1st of April. And so we said to firms, pay them at the end of the quarter, not at the beginning of the quarter, and if you choose to, pay them quarterly. But we also said, if you can pay, please pay. And I'm delighted that these firms have heeded that call, and we have had over £1.2 million paid in fees, which weren't due until July, already paid by the firms in the financial services sector. So a very big thank you to them for heeding the call and supporting us at this time. We have also received from every single gaming firm representations in respect of what they believe we should be looking to do in the future with our Task Force Future project, which I am working on together with my colleagues Gilbert, who is here with us today, and Vijay Darianani. We've also received representations from every single association in the financial services community under the umbrella of the Finance Centre Council. And indeed, I have now received a strategy document for our future from the team at Gibraltar Finance. To all of them, an enormous thank you. A lot of work has gone into those documents, and I'm very grateful for people having spent the time. It's clear to me that as a community, we're not only generous in contributing with money and donations to all the different charities, whether it's the GHA COVID Fund or indeed many of the other charities that are now asking for support. I know that the former Minister for Health, Neil Costa, and my own brother are raising money for cancer relief this week. It's not just money. It's people are giving us their time, their knowledge, and their expertise. And today, we need that also. So I'm extremely grateful to all the associations who have fed us with a huge amount of information, which we, as the group of ministers that will now be looking at this work, will be preparing as we break it down into a communal strategy for all of the private sector from Gibraltar. So an enormous thank you. And my final plea before we take some questions is to say, it's another long weekend. It's difficult, especially when the weather is good. Please resist the temptation of thinking this is over. We're doing damn well. The future is bright, but please, let's follow the rules and stick with the advice that we're receiving. Thank you very much, and we're now happy to take questions.
Hi, yes, from GBC. I've got a question for Mr. Ligudi, which is related to the government has said that it's going to be focusing on a much more aggressive contact tracing program as part of its strategy going forward. How will the schools deal with this in terms of their reopening, given that this could affect a large number of staff and children, should there be a case, in terms of how many people they come into contact with?
What we have said is that going forward, any measures to ease the restrictions involve a number of strategies. In particular, they involve aggressive testing and contact tracing. There has been, as you will have seen, and from the figures that I gave you today, frontline staff, a random testing program already started, and that is to include teachers. In fact, teachers were supposed to start today, or due to start today, in being part of that random program. So a large number of teachers are going to be tested as part of that. We will not be opening the schools properly in terms of all the schools until the 26th of May. By then, I expect, and I am advised by Public Health Gibraltar, that the contact tracing functions will be in place by the end of next week. So what will happen is that whether it's as part of the random testing program or because of symptoms and normal testing, then there will be contact tracing carried out to whoever that person has been in contact with, and those persons will be contacted in turn by Public Health Gibraltar. They will then the level of risk that has been involved. At the very start, what will happen is that the person that has tested positive will be asked to self-isolate. In respect of contacts, depending on, again, the level of contact and the amount of contact that there has been, an assessment will be made on whether those persons will be asked to self-isolate, to have a swab and have a test, or whether there is no need for those things to happen. As of today, that function of contact tracing has not happened. I'm told it will be in place by the end of next week. So that is a process that will happen in respect of both the testing and the random and the contact tracing as we go forward, as we start to ease restrictions. It is important. It's not just a question of opening up the doors and starting to open businesses and bars, restaurants, schools. We need to be aware of the effect of that. Testing and contact tracing is an important part of that process.
Can I just ask as well, obviously we've heard about the contact tracing app, which is one of the major strategies with the contact tracing, but in terms of children, obviously not all of them are going to have mobile phones or be allowed to keep them switched on. So what form of contact tracing would be carried out in schools as an alternative?
Well, it's not the schools themselves that will be doing this. This will be an exercise involving Public Health Gibraltar and the GHA, the people that are involved, the team. There's a big team involved in doing this. So primarily what they will do is focus on who the person that is identified as having been infected, who they've been in contact with, and then do a process of contacting those people. Certainly the app, when it comes, will help, but as you say, not everybody may have access to the app. So there will be other mechanisms in place. This is not about just putting one measure in place, whether it's the app or anything else, exclusively to do this exercise. It will be a combination of factors which will be brought together in order to make this very effective.
From the Chronicle, are there any plans to extend the BEAT scheme beyond June, for example, for the worst hit sectors?
I think the step that we've announced this far is BEAT is open for the included sectors for the second quarter of 2020. We have now added the private sector, the excluded sector, BEAT equivalent at their cost, not at the government's expense, obviously. And I think it's way too early as to what we're going to be planning to do after. But of course, we are looking, we are carrying out our own inquiries, we are looking at what's being done elsewhere. There's an interesting article today in the Times, which the Chief Minister sent me, reporting on what Chancellor Sunak's ideas are, and the 4 ideas that he's had, we've actually done all 4 of them. So it's, we're going well. We are keeping a very close tab with all the different sectors within the private sector to ensure that we are understanding the concerns they have. There are particular problems in particular areas of that private sector, and we are listening and working with them to see in what way we can provide that safety net and support them. So I think there are still more initiatives that will be announced in supporting of business, which the Chief Minister will be doing, I hope, in the coming days also.
Thank you. I'll read out a few questions from home, please, now. The first is for Minister Likudi from Your Gibraltar TV. Teachers are the next group of frontline workers who will be swabbed. What is the procedure if a teacher tests positive for COVID-19? Will their close contacts be traced? Would this include any students they have been in recent contact with?
This is essentially almost the same question as I've just answered from Christina from GBC. But to the extent that a teacher is identified as being positive now as part of the process, the swabbing that is taking place in the next few days, the procedure will be exactly the same as it has been until now. And until now, the advice will have been from Public Health Gibraltar, you need to self-isolate. You need to go home and spend your time in isolation. That is what is going to happen for the next few days until the contact tracing arrangements are in place, which I'm told will happen at the end of next week. Things will then change, and there will be much more aggressive contact tracing in respect of all the testing that is done. It's important to remember that the numbers we're getting is low. In the random testing program, out of 700 odd swabs and 549 results received, we've had just 2. Those 2 are from a particular sector, but the process is designed to find out the extent to which we have the virus out there and the extent to which we need to take measures to make sure that we control the spread of that virus.
Thank you, Minister. The next question is from Olive Press. It's for either of you. Following a question from a reader, will the government allow inactive staff access to the ETB list of vacancies online, especially for employees that have been rejected payments as part of the Beat COVID scheme?
That's an odd and unusual question, if I may say, in the sense that if you are inactive, you are still in employment. And so somebody that is on the Beat scheme is employed, is just being declared inactive. If he wishes to terminate his employment, of course, he's free to do so, but requires the approval of the Director of Employment because those have been suspended. So the simple answer is if you're an inactive employee, you can't register yourself as unemployed because actually you are employed. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Minister. The next question is from the Panorama. Has the decision to reopen schools been unanimous? And as Minister for Education, is it mainly your decision? And on what basis do you reach such an important and delicate decision?
Everything we've done so far has been on the basis of public health advice. We received, all of us collectively,
And unanimous.
A view as to how we ease our way out of lockdown, as to the conditions that have to be applied, the public health criteria, which I referred to before, and the various steps that could be taken. One of those steps involves businesses, then there are education steps as well, and other steps will obviously involve bars and restaurants in due course. So education was an integral part of that process from the very, very outset. It was something that we discussed in Cabinet. We agreed the broad parameters of how we were going to take these particular steps and when, always consistent with the advice and the pauses that have to be made in between. Then we started engaging with the union, NASU, UWT, as to the process of the unlocking and the reopening of the schools. When I say reopening of schools, I naturally mean the partial and very limited reopening of the schools, which we will have between now and the 7th of July. We've developed a roadmap for education, which includes the year groups, the analysis that we need to do, the steps, the strategies to mitigate the risks, the social aspects of this and the emotional aspects of that. That is in a roadmap which will be included in the wider roadmap which the government will be publishing, and that education roadmap has been discussed at length with union officials and has been agreed. So this is essentially a consensus approach that we have been adopting, both from the government point of view and the teachers' union.
Okay, thank you both. We'll return to the floor, and GBC, please.
Yes, given that more people will be returning to work, to their workplaces, but grandparents still can't look after the children, is there any plans to increase the amount of childcare provision currently on offer?
What we will see is the numbers rising as people start to work. There is absolutely no doubt about that. Over the last few weeks, we've had about 160, I think I've mentioned, 150, 160 children attending the childcare facilities. This week, we've seen a slight increase to that. We're in about 200 children attending. The change that will happen on the 26th of May is that those facilities will continue, but they will continue in all the schools. Rather than being concentrated in just Notre Dame, St. Anne's and West Side, they will continue in all the schools, as well as St. Martin's continue to operate as it has been operating until now. So those facilities will continue. We do expect that some numbers will rise, but we do emphasize that this is only for those children of parents who need to go out to work. If the parents are at home or one of the parents is at home, the children should remain at home unless they're one of the year groups that are being brought back. We need to do this gradually. We need to do this sensibly and prudently. We need to reduce the number of children in terms of the space, making maximum use of the space. So, for example, we're going to have 1 year group going back year 2, for example, half in the morning, half in the afternoon, just 1 year group in the whole school. So that means that there will be plenty of space to be used for social distancing purposes. But at the same time, we will have children of other year groups, and we need to control the numbers and limit and make sure that those are available only for those children that fall within those categories. As we go through this process, there will be some things that we will not be able to do, because we can't have the normal school hours for certain children, the home learning, the creche, the extended hours, the weekend. It's simply not possible. So I announced before that weekend supervision will cease on the 17th of May, and the extended hours supervision will cease on the 22nd of May. We have had very, very few children taking advantage or needing the weekend and the extended hours, so I don't expect that will be much of an impact. But yes, these facilities will be available only for those children that absolutely require it, and subject to a form being filled in by the parents the Thursday before the Monday that they wish to make use of the facilities.
The Chronicle. The government had indicated that it would publish its exit strategy document this week. Given that tomorrow is a bank holiday, when can we expect this to be published? And can you explain why the delay?
There isn't really a delay. It's just we've been looking at it a little bit closer than we originally envisaged. I expect it to be published Monday or Tuesday. It's a couple of days. I think if you look around the world, we are in the middle of many other movements. So you've got the UK, you've got Spain. They're both doing their own lockdowns and programs of lockdowns. And I expect we will be coming out pretty much at the same time that they do over this long weekend. It'll be published Monday or Tuesday. We are discussing the final document at Cabinet on Monday morning. And after that, I would hope that it can then be published by the Chief Minister before you all.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to go back to reading some more from home. The first one is from the Olive Press. Once the beat payments stop, a lot of tourism workers within Gibraltar will be left jobless and won't benefit from the generous unemployment benefit workers receive in Spain. Will the government help Gibraltar-based people retrain into another job sector or assist them in some way until the situation improves, bearing in mind those people have large mortgages or rents to pay?
I think the answer to that is whatever we do, we will do together. So we will consult with the different sectors, we will understand the nature and the issue of the problems that they have. It's impossible to predict today where we're going to be in June, July, in August or September. This is a real challenge that we're facing. And so the only commitment that we can give is that government will continue to support employees and employers in the way that we've done this far into the future, but in a new way, which we will discuss with them and work our way through with them as we have done up until now. So I expect CELAC, for example, to be fully engaged and involved in whatever programs we begin to put into place for after Q2 of this year, where we have the beat measures and the business measures already announced. We'll see which of those, if any, require to be continued in Q3, and how we do that and how we introduce and implement those will be done together.
Thank you, Minister. Our next question today comes from the Panorama, who say that they keep getting questions from elderly ladies who would like to be allowed access to the hairdressers. So why should you be so negative about it? Why can't you say yes once and for all?
Look, I mean, neither of us look after hairdressers, and I never go to one, but we'd love to say yes. I think people need to understand that we would love to have everybody walking up and down Main Street in normality, but that is not where we are. So despite our best wishes that they should be able to go to the hairdressers and as quickly as possible, we are following the advice and that is what we are acting upon. So as soon as we are able, and we are advised that we are able to allow that to happen, we will.
Thank you, Minister. Our final question today is for you, Minister Isola, and it's from Your Gibraltar TV. What impact has the cancellation of sporting events across the globe had on locally based gaming companies?
Huge. When your business is taking bets on sports and there's no sports, your business stops. And there are some businesses in Gibraltar that primarily focus on betting, so they're pretty much stopped. There are others that do betting and gaming, so roulette, casino, card games, and all the other social games that can be played with these. So they've continued. There are some that do more of the gaming and so haven't been impacted. So the impact is very, very varied. But obviously, when these businesses rely to the extent that they do on sports events, it's a serious problem. You will see that Germany has announced the Bundesliga is going to start behind closed doors. They've already announced a date. I think it's the middle of the end of May or middle of June. So that will begin to get activity going. And all those that like to bet, I'm sure, will be looking at those games and betting on those games. So it's very varied from company to company and sector to sector, but of course, seriously impacted.
Thanks, everyone. There's no further questions today.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to wrap up? This brings us to the end of another of the COVID-19 daily briefing. Tomorrow we will have, I understand, the Chief Minister here with His Excellency the Governor on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of VE Day. It's an important occasion. It's a bank holiday, and we hope that you all remain sensible, you all remain safe, you all follow the advice despite the good weather. As Albert has just mentioned, we would so dearly love to have everybody out and about and being able to enjoy themselves, but we are where we are. We need to take the precautions that we are taking. We're not out of the woods yet. We're in a pretty good position. We have done pretty well so far, and that's the way we have to continue to manage this process. So stay well, stay safe, keep your social distance, keep washing your hands, and keep following your advice. Good afternoon.